What do you do? How do you reinvent yourself?
Well, I go back to how I said founders are crazy. So we always want to start new companies. People don't even know that we started a company before we started recording within the 5 minutes of speaking to each other. So obviously the answer is I'm going to start more companies.
Colorado Bum coming to a store near you in 2 months. Welcome back to the Badass Women in Business podcast. Today, we are very privileged to be joined by Scarlett Leung, co-founder of Pretty Tasty, a wellness beverage brand that scaled over, drumroll, 2,000 retail doors in its first year and earned as well, great accolade, Best New Beverage by BevNet. With experience across major retailers. And Scarlett, I think you've also been venture backed. Yeah. She brings a grounded perspective on what it really takes to build and grow a modern consumer brand. She's focused on creating something meaningful while navigating the realities of scaling, decision-making, and staying true to the mission. You know, things we actually do care about on this podcast. So Scarlett, welcome. Take us back. How did you get here?
Thank you for having me, and get ready for a really long-winded story because I took a very non-traditional and unplanned path to entrepreneurship. I actually never thought I'd become a founder and entrepreneur. I come from a super entrepreneurial family. My family's originally from Hong Kong. Business is sort of in the blood. And I watched my uncles, my dad, like work in the family business. And all they did was talk about business at the dinner table. Business always came first, to the point that at my graduation, my dad would be like, I could be, closing a deal, but I'm here. Do you think it was worth it? Like, it was crazy. And so my mom's like, don't ever become a founder. Please, like, do that corporate life. Her dream was for me to, become like a housewife. And if you asked me in my 20s and maybe, I would have probably said the same. I was like, oh yeah, my goal, like have kids at 30 and like stay at home. I am so far from that. So, I sort of fell into it and then realized that this is what I do and this is what I love. I started my career at Deloitte. I'm a CPA by training. I get made fun of it a lot because, investors will be like, you're like the first accountant I've ever met who like became a founder. But like, actually, those were amazing skills because I've, run finance teams. I've, been in very senior finance roles in big companies that, helps me understand the numbers. After Deloitte, I went to work for Philip Morris, big tobacco, not very proud of that. But it was a large multinational company. I was in their internal audit team. It was well known that if you could get into that and do well, and every multinational will want to hire you. And sure enough, L'Oreal came, knocking on my door, asking me to help them grow Lancôme, which is their largest brand and 60% of the revenue in Asia. And I always knew I wanted to go into retail, so I did that. And while I was doing that, I realized how much I loved like marketing and operations as well. And so I went back to business school, went to MIT, and then sort of went into retail. My dream was to work for, LVMH. I wanted to go into luxury. Ended up meeting the CEO of All Saints, the British fashion retailer. They were just coming out of bankruptcy, private equity backed. And he's like, I don't have a specific role for you, but he's like, just come and help me turn around this company. I ended up running North America as an intern, growing that to a $200 million business. I know my coworkers, they still like, tease me. They're like, remember when we had an intern run our business? And it was my first time running a retail business too. So, but luckily I was in business school. It was my summer internship. I would call my professors and be like, So I'm redoing the entire pricing strategy. Like, I just took your pricing class. Can you just like look at this like regression analysis I did? Like, you think it's going to work? Thankfully, it worked. Everything worked. And, I beat forecast multiple times after graduation. They were like, can you do what you did, but for other sides of the business? Ended up moving to London. I ran their global outlet business, grew that business, threefold in a few months, and then took over the European business. Ended up creating the first Amazon store with the brand. And then I started their franchise business, took them into the Middle East and Latin America, got a ton of experience, but then realized that, well, I sort of ran out of countries to take the business to. But also, I'm like, selling clothes, it's cool. But at the end of the day, am I really making the world a better place? Am I, what's the true mission behind it? And I didn't like living in London, honestly. I'm sorry, whoever's listening. So I moved back to New York, ended up joining Fresh Direct just as Whole Foods got purchased by Amazon, and Fresh Direct was, the largest online grocery retailer at that time. So I helped turn that business around, and then got recruited by a private equity firm to start an egg freezing company. Very random. They were calling me for months. I'm like, finally, I was like, you have the wrong person. I don't know why you're calling me. And they're like, no, we have the right person. They're like, we feel like we can teach you healthcare, but we can't teach a healthcare professional how to think about customer experience. So we would really like you to, start this business for us, and we'll bankroll you. So I started the first egg freezing specific clinic in the US and ran that. After a year or so, unfortunately, my investors decided that they wanted to divest out of their entire fertility portfolio, ended up shutting it down when I thought that I was getting more funding for an expansion, and then started my next company that was called Sugar Break, which was supplements to help manage blood sugar, because I realized 1 in 3 Americans are pre-diabetic or diabetic. And it was like the most unsexy thing for people to talk about. So I'm like, what if I made like a consumer brand that would educate people on blood sugar, and people would like to take supplements now. And, I'm Chinese, so I wanted to bring in like Eastern medicine to help people proactively manage that. Ran that business for, this is so long, for a few years, and that was venture backed. Ended up leaving the business because, co-founder issues. And then luckily I had investors who wanted to invest in that business. One ended up funding Pretty Tasty, and we ended up launching this company together. Another one acquired Deepak Chopra's wellness business. So I ended up becoming CEO and COO of the holding company for a while I got Pretty Tasty off the ground. And that's how I got here.
No short journey at all. An incredible experience across the board. I love your willingness to just pivot and say yes and just kind of move with where life took you. I'm curious only because, I'm sitting here with my lovely co-founder. Can you tell us more about those co-founder issues? When did they start surfacing? And what was the true breaking point? And because so many people get into business for the wrong reasons together. And those are kind of the things I want to identify and surface.
I think you should end that question by asking for a friend, Christy, because that makes a bigger impact.
Well, one of my co-founders was a very well-known entrepreneur and someone I really looked up to. So when he called me and said that I want to start a company with you, first I was so flattered, and I'm like, this is my idol. So what's the worst that could happen? And so I sort of went in like that, and I had 3 co-founders. The other 2 were his childhood friends. So maybe that was, a bad idea from the beginning. I think because they had known each other for so long, and it was my first time really negotiating equity, I was I sort of let them sort of lead the way. And he was like, no, this is how it goes. Don't worry. We'll increase our equity over time. It was like, even the investors who are investing were very concerned about how the cap table was split and how I was the CEO and the full-time person running the business, yet I had significantly less equity than everyone else. But, the understanding was that that would change. It didn't change. And so the sort of breaking point was when the business was growing very rapidly. I was full-time CEO still. One of my, co-founders sort of very part-time on the board. The other two had taken other full-time jobs, and yet the equity hadn't changed and more money was coming in. Investors wanted to know that I was properly incentivized and could actually, make decisions. And we couldn't come to an agreement on that. And so it was a really, really tough decision because it was like my baby and I really believed in the mission. And I still sit on the national board for the Diabetes Research Institute. I think it's such an important, cause and disease that we should find a cure to. But I had an investor literally sit down with me for like hours on end. And she was like, this is not the sword you fall on. She's like, you can always start another business. And she's like, don't waste the next few years trying to fix this and stay on. And she's like, what, best case scenario, you sell it and then you end up with nothing. And she's like, why? And enough people who had no skin in the game, who I respected, talked to me about it, that I was like, okay, you're right. Like I should step away. And even in current investors who were going to lose their, investment told me that they couldn't ask me to stay given the circumstances. So yeah, that's what happened. But it was painful. It was painful. And after that, I really lost. I felt like I didn't know who I was anymore. I felt like that was my identity. Like I was the founder of this company. And after that, I didn't know who I was. And to make things worse, like I had, a founder friend, I saw like they had gone away on a retreat and I was like, why wasn't I invited? And they're like, well, you're not part of our company anymore. So you're not a real founder. And that was like, it just really piled on to, how I was feeling.
First of all, that sucks. Sorry you went through that.
It's okay. I'm better and I'm grown. It was a good learning experience.
And that reaction is testament to your entire career so far, as Christy said, and your ability to pivot and get back up when you fall down. And that idol paradox, to where when you meet the person that you've been looking up to for years and you find out that they're a raging asshole, that is just unfortunate. And it happens more times than people think.
I didn't say he was a raging asshole, for the record.
I am putting words in my own mouth. I'm not putting words in your mouth. I'm just saying that I have had the experience of meeting people that I've looked up to find out that they were nowhere close to what my expectations of were.
Yeah. When they say don't meet your idols.
Yeah.
That's what they mean.
Just don't. Yeah. My question is your phone number publicly listed that all those people are calling you to like start companies with them and, do things with them? Like, how do they find you?
I was really nervous when you said that. I thought you were like, I actually found your phone number on the internet. I'm like, oh, I guess it is then. I do get random calls all the time. LinkedIn. I get a lot of LinkedIn messages, or like through my network, I'll get, people asking friends to be connected with me. One of the funny things that sort of come out from like me being in consumer now for a number of years is that I started getting a lot of intros and calls from celebrities who want to start consumer brands. And I didn't expect that at all. So for the longest time, I mean, literally until a few months ago, my mom thought I did PR for celebrities.
Was Chrissy Teigen one of the messages that you got to start a consumer brand with her?
I don't think I can answer that.
Straight up. The only reason I'm asking is last year, Christy and I were at a conference, and the last person I would have thought to start a consumer brand was there presenting on stage. And so seemed like it was an aligned opportunity. But no, please keep your secrets. I'm curious. So you ended up doing something extraordinary as an intern. And I know from the profile of our listeners, there are people who are in their MBA track or maybe still in undergrad that are listening to us. Like, how did you actually, how did that opportunity happen for you? And why did you say yes? And what advice can you give to people who are now either right on the verge of graduating or thinking about graduate school of how do you get a gig like that?
Yeah. So if you can't tell, I'm very B-type. I'm just kidding. So during business school, I'm like, I would be in retail. This is my goal. Because the first time I realized I wanted to be in retail luxury was I was catching up with an old colleague and he was like, oh yeah, I work at LVMH now. And I'm like, going to see the designers doing it. And I've like never felt envy in my life. And I was like, what is this feeling that I'm feeling? I'm like, why? I'm like, oh, it's envy. I was like, I need to do something about that. So when I went to business school, I knew I wanted to be in retail. So of course I become one of the presidents of the retail club because that way I can basically structure the internship programs and have an excuse to woo all the big companies, which I was very good at. So I got a lot of internships for my classmates in the year below me. But because of that, I organized trips to like meet CEOs of all these retail businesses. I did get an internship offer from LVMH, and it was great because there was only one between Harvard and MIT, and it was to me, although I turned it down. But that's where I met the CEO of All Saints. And I knew that if I wanted to change careers, I needed to go somewhere where I could learn and do a lot very quickly and prove myself. And I loved that at All Saints, I was working directly for the CEO, and he, was going to hand over the reins for me to do, crazy things, with the business, while at LVMH, I was reporting to a manager. It was like a lot of red tape and very hierarchical. And I just felt like the progression and the learning wouldn't be as steep. And I needed something that was like a baptism of fire to see if I would survive and, prove to myself that maybe I could do it.
If anyone listening isn't picking up on it, you have got the best attitude. Not only do you look at things and challenges head on, yeah, let's go. But the beautiful smile you have on your face of just yeah, bring it on. It's just, it says a lot about your character. So thank you for your transparency.
Crazy, because I am a founder. So,
I was like most founders. A little bit
of risk compartmentalization and this idea that you can be successful even though the numbers tell you no.
It's pretty safe to say you're in good company, but
yeah. Everyone's a little crazy if you're willing to take those risks. I am curious. Let's talk about your new brand.
Yeah.
Pretty Tasty Tea.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
I need to send you guys some after.
Thank you. I'm not going to say no to that.
Don't tell people what your address is on the podcast.
Oh, shoot. I was about to give it to you.
Unlike my phone number.
So how did the brand start from a vision perspective?
Yeah,
let's just start there.
Yeah, so there were some parameters. So the investor who was going to invest in my last company and is my investor now, when he was like, let's just start something, it's a family office in a bank, and his family's in banking and real estate, but he loves consumer brands. So has purchased a few distressed brands that he sort of turned around, and they're all in the beverage space. So we wanted to sort of try a hybrid model where I was the, new outside person. It was the first sort of brand from scratch he invested in. So he wanted to sort of de-risk it by having seasoned professionals that has already worked with him and he has employed in Beverage to sort of partner with me to create this. I loved it because I'm notorious for like, thinking that Beverage is really high risk, and I don't even invest in it from an angel perspective. So at trade shows, these beverage founders will walk by and they're like, "Excuse me, you have a brand now?" I'm like, "I know, I'm sorry," but like because you need like really experienced people and you need a lot of capital, and so like those two things were satisfied with like the investor I had, and then I sort of thought about what I would like to drink. I guess that's sort of fixing our own pain point. I love collagen. My grandmother, ever since I was a little girl, would be like, if you want to have nice skin, eat more collagen. And it's just like mainly in food and broths and all that kind of stuff. My grandmother's like 100 now. At 90, she still had no wrinkles. It's amazing. She has dementia now, so when I FaceTime her, she'll be like, "Why do I have wrinkles?" I'm like, "Grandma, you're 100. She's like, "Why is your skin better than mine?" I'm like, "I am much younger than you." And she'll be like, asking me about my I was like, "I don't want to answer these questions anymore." But then, so as an adult, I would take powdered collagen and put it into my coffee, and it was gritty. I like bovine collagen, made it taste brothy. It was really annoying to wash. And one morning I was just like, why am I ruining my morning routine? This like cherished, like, ritual just because I need to have collagen. And then I sort of looked at the trends and the holes in the market, like saw that functional beverages were really taking off. But if you look at what those beverages are, people don't really know how much of whatever you need to take. And also they were very complicated. It's like, oh, do you want this like hibiscus, like blood orange, like, cacao plus, lion's mane, L-theanine, and like I'm like I don't know, like there's too many decisions. So I wanted super simple, and then I love iced tea. Part of my childhood, I grew up in Hong Kong, and iced tea was like the juice pack that we would, which probably kids shouldn't have that much caffeine, but it is what it is. So I made it based on like a sort of like a diet Snapple, like peach, raspberry, lemon, and unsweetened black tea, and very straightforward 10 grams of collagen, which is, the amount you need to take every day for clinical efficacy to improve your hair, skin, and nails. And also, there's not a lot of innovation in iced tea. And every few years, there's a big exit. Iced tea was, what I drank a lot of and got purchased by Coke, and shut down. So like it really left a gap in the market. And so I was hoping from a business perspective that would fit in. I also wanted something that looked really pretty because I was, working in like blood sugar, and like egg freezing isn't like very fun. So I was like, maybe I should do something a little bit more fun. And then, the joke of having like 3 drinks, one for hydration, one for energy, and one just for fun. I was like, I can combine it all into one drink. So that's how this came to be.
From a branding perspective, egg freezing could have been branded pretty sexy.
Yes, my clinic was featured in Vogue, so it was very sexy.
That's amazing.
Thank you. I helped design it.
That's incredible. Egg freezing in Vogue.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you what was the brand naming like? I know that Christy and I, when we were trying to name our business, was a whole process of like, do we like this? Do we like that? Do we not like this? Like what represents us? But I'm curious, what did it look like for you? Honestly,
the website was available and we were shocked that it was. And we're like, okay, I think this would work. And it's really funny because whenever people try the drink and they look at me and they're like, oh, it's pretty tasty. And I'm like, yes. They're like, I'm not the first one, right? I'm like, no, you're not. But then when I was formulating this with my investor, we spent almost 2 years. And it's ready. And I was like, let me drink it. And they're like, don't worry, it's good. I'm like, if it ends up not being good and people nickname it pretty nasty, I will be very pissed off. And so thankfully that has not happened.
I love it. So you threw out the stats that you scaled to 2,000 doors really quickly.
Yeah.
And there's so many people in the CPG space that have no clue how to even start. So let's go behind the scenes and tell me a little bit more about how you achieved that growth. And was there something that people would not expect as a strategy or anything along those ways?
Well, I think a big part of it was we won Best New Beverage. That pitch contest really gave me the confidence to double down on the business. Because, I think, I don't know what, like 2,000 brands like apply and then only like 12 pitch. And, you have the biggest retailers there as judges. So that really gave me confidence that I was onto something. And I think that also gave other retailers confidence that we should back this brand and bring this brand into our stores. And CVS was one of the first retailers. So that was, a huge retailer to land. We're now also nationwide Sprouts and rolling out in Target in a few months. So that's going to double. But I think that was a big part. It's helpful that I have, a team that has been in beverage. And so they got the right, brokers to help us, scale, and they knew how to scale and get into these stores and operationally be able to support that. I think my greatest asset is really my Rolodex. I've had a lot of different jobs in a lot of different industries, but I've collected people over the years who I've worked with and, who trust me. And so it's been helpful because they know who I am. And so say, Target, they know me already because I've launched with them before. CVS as well, I've launched with them before. So it also gave them confidence that I knew what I was doing. And it's not my first rodeo.
I was going to ask you how much your relationships factored in your success, which I think they always
big time,
no matter. Yeah, for sure.
Big time. Even hiring people, it's just I know that there are a bunch of people who would quit their jobs that day and work, and work for me again, which I'm very, very proud of, but it also makes everything easier.
Yeah, 100%. Christy and I occasionally work with CPG brands, usually differentiating themselves as better for you options than their competitors, but they don't necessarily have those relationships. So let's say for a CPG brand owner who does not have those relationships and maybe doesn't want to spend their time doing roadshows and showing up to doors with takings, what would be your advice to scaling their brand past just state level retailers?
Are you an influencer? Maybe
personally,
that would be helpful. No, I mean, for them, I'm you have to if you don't want to do a roadshow, you don't want to go door to door, hopefully you have some internet clout or something, then you don't need to do that, or start making some friends and hopefully and add them to and get people to be on your advisory board who has those relationships and who can open those doors for you, or investors, and build your network that way.
Yeah, that's super valuable advice. And what have you seen, specifically? You're in the F&B, or you're in you're on the beverage side of things, but just if you take the food and bev market right now, who are the winners and who are the losers, generally speaking, when you're seeing those new brands popping up here and there?
Oh, that's a really difficult question, because sometimes I'm the longer I've been in the industry, the more I'm sometimes do I even know what I'm doing? Because there are brands that win, and they're the ones that I tasted and spat out, I'm how is this, how have they been able to get so much market share or grow? And so it's just, I don't know. I feel when you're venture backed, I think there's this skill of fundraising. If you can fundraise really well and sell your story really well and have that endless amount of capital, you can afford to make a lot more mistakes and iterate and survive that will outlast competitors. And I think that makes you a winner. And I think a lot of, losers were just going to categorize it as like business that have shut down or, haven't been able to sell or grow. I think a lot of times, even though they're really good products, when you taste them, it's, sometimes just not being able to get that story out and getting the capital to grow at that speed.
Can you go deeper on fundraising and capital? Because so many people, there's so many different ways to accomplish and achieve that. And I'd love to kind of hear how you made those decisions and any advice for people that are seeking those opportunities, how to get their foot in the door if they don't have a badass Rolodex like you do. And for our younger listeners, a Rolodex is your contacts in your cell phone. FYI.
So old. When you said that, what reminded me of? In that scene when Harry met Sally, she like literally pulls out her Rolodex and she's like, oh, looking through the guys that she can introduce you.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
I love it.
Oh my God.
I mean, it creates the visual for me. And I'm like, I used to love playing with my Rolodex. Anyway, back to the question.
I think you just need to build it. You just need to put yourself out there. Like I did, I don't know, 7 years ago, didn't know a single venture investor, and I just met one, started going to events. Like, I think, in the startup world and venture, like they love throwing events, you just need to go show up. People love meeting new people. So just put yourself out there, and do some research. You can find things to go to and to every night, multiple times a night, and you're going to meet some people. And everyone knows it's really hard to build a business, I think. And so people want to help you. Like, I think it's one of these rare sort of jobs where we're all suffering. So, we're going to try to help each other out. But I think funding is an interesting question. Of course, I think the best way, we're all building business with the assumption that we're going to sell or, it's going to be profitable, it's going to be big, right? So, of course, the best way to do it is with your own money, because then you own the whole thing and you can make all the decisions, or take out a small business loan because you still own it. But if you don't want to do that, venture, I think, is great, but you have to think about the economics of a venture fund, which I think a lot of people don't understand, because at the end of the day, venture funds need to return their fund, right? They need to make more money than they spent by a multiple. And so you have to think about whether your brand or the product you're creating is a business that can have a valuation that can return at a multiple, because maybe it can't. And a lot of consumer brands aren't actually made for that. So I think if you're not ready to grow at a really high speed, or you think that you could do that, raising one round, you're going to have to go through multiple rounds. Very rarely does a business get to, an exit with one round of funding. And so, you need to take that into consideration. Private equity is a completely different beast, because they're not going to invest until you're at a much larger stage of the business. And, their whole business thesis is like sort of, they buy you, they flip you, but like when they flip you, they're trying to cut costs between that in order to make money, right? So are you okay with your business sort of being, cut down? Is there enough fat there without ruining what you had? Or do you not care? And then I'm funded by family office. So clearly in this iteration of my career, I think that's like the best way to fund a business, because I think that when you're aligned with your investor, it's a sort of evergreen capital. They're growing this with you. You don't need to answer to the same KPIs that you do as venture. You sort of acknowledge and agree upon with your investor what they care about, and as long as you're able to achieve that, they keep on giving you money. So like, I think that for me is like the best of both worlds without having to use my own money. And I can sort of have that not be forced into this like hamster wheel of growth.
Those are really good insights. I think that you're spot on the, especially the enterprise value growth part that you were talking about. Even if you're building your business, it needs to be built as an asset, whether you have people that are investing external funds into it, or you're growing it yourself. And we see it over and over again, to where especially women start businesses thinking that they will start and end their life in it. And so they're walking out on things that could be sold at some point in time, whether it's now or later, but being prepped for that, for unforeseen circumstances, because things happen in life that pull you away from your priorities at some point in time. So thanks for sharing those insights. You mentioned exiting. And so I'm curious, what your plan is for that at some point in time.
I would like an exit because, being on a founder salary is not fun. I'm always like praying for an exit.
So hold on. You mean to say that when you're a founder and you're starting your company, you're not making millions of dollars through your bankrolls?
Yes, investors love it when they give you money. You take most of it home, and then you're like, I'm going to leave this small amount to grow this business that we're supposed to sell for a lot of money.
Hashtag demystify.
Yeah, I know. It's like, those glamorous like founder things that you see on social media. That's, as glamorous as it gets. We just get to go to events, that seem like, I guess they are cool, but, that's the perk. You get to go to a work event. That's cool.
So does that mean you get to go back on those retreats that you've been missing out on by not being a founder at some point in time?
Sometimes, or the last retreat it was gifted to me. Okay, that's how I get to go on retreats. It needs to be comped or I can't go.
Okay,
I love it. Since we were just talking about exit, one thing I find really interesting for myself as a consumer is when you see better for you brands or purpose-driven brands sell out to the large public companies, it makes me lose, as a consumer, a lot of trust and faith in the ingredients and what that product is going to be like after it's purchased. And I'm thinking of a product that just had a huge exit. How important is that to you as a founder, that the essence of the product stays the same versus just an exit? And is there any way to protect that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something I think about because obviously, it's built for an exit. And like I said, I would like to be rich, but it's like, it's your baby. You've built it, right? And you want it, you built it for a reason. You make these like decisions on, what is acceptable and not as ingredients, like you said. And that's what your consumer believes in you and trusts in you. And they're the reason you have an exit and you've grown the brand. So you have to be loyal to them. I think Ben and Jerry's did it best, sort of the clauses that they wrote in to sort of protect the brand and be able to run it independently and preserve what they had created. Of course, I think, there have been some issues, but in recent years, but I think that's what you need to do, like when you're selling your company, and make sure like what are your non-negotiables and what do you might not be the majority owner anymore, or maybe, but you can still say that there are certain things that you have to be able to be the decision maker at the end of the day. And I think it's not even at an exit while you're growing the business. You start bringing in capital, you're going to lose control of your business. You're rarely do you take in money and you can like scale it highly and still be a 51% majority holder and, have control of the board, right? So you have to have those terms written in early on, regardless.
You said earlier that you were not anticipating getting into the beverage industry because it is high risk and you need to have a lot of money, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
I'm curious if, since you stepped into your role, that there is anything you've had to become that you had not planned for or that you were not expecting.
I'm taking a more public role in my business, which I think is out of my comfort zone. My sister would be like, I told you to become an influencer like 20 plus years ago. She's like, you have been an OG influencer. She's like, all you do is like eat and stuff. I was like, people love that. But then I was like, no, I don't want to put my life on display. I'm like, now I'm willing to sell myself out because people love the content when I'm in it. So I'm like, I guess I'm going to do this now. So yeah, it feels weird. And it definitely feels weird when people like come up to me like, oh, I recognize or I know you. I'm like, or weren't you just like on vacation here? I'm like, who are you? Like, how do you know this about me? I'm like, oh, right. It was on social media. And I feel so exposed, but it is what it is.
Your phone number is public. Now you're publicly displaying yourself on social media.
No. Yeah. Actually, only like once in a trade show, someone on my team put my actual phone number on my business card and they were giving it out. I started getting these texts from people. And I'm like, do not destroy these cards and don't do that ever again.
Oh my goodness.
It's never people you want who's going to text you. It's not going to be like, oh, hello, like, can I buy your business for $1 billion over text because I got this like business card? It's not going to be that person. It's going to be like the weird person who's like, I think you should use our cans.
So is there any part, so I'm hearing you loud and clear to where you're front and center, but is there any other part of your success that's actually uncomfortable for you?
Well, I'm not the CEO of Pretty Tasty, which has been the first time I've taken a step back from really having like major control of my business for a really, really long time. Because even when I was like in leadership roles, like even back at All Saints, like my region's my region, like I get to do whatever I want. And so it was hard. I was like, I'm not tied to this role. I cried for like months because I was like, why am I so attached to this? I was like, I hate myself. And then I realized it's because it's like something more like internal work of like, as a woman, I felt like, you know, I talk about like how my family and my mom really expected me to just be a housewife. I felt like I had so many years of like trying to prove myself as a woman, being the youngest, you know, in the boardroom. That title gave me so much sort of, I guess, like it made me feel like I made it and I proved myself. And so like letting go of that was really hard. It wasn't because I loved, you know, all the things that came with the title and, you know, managing investors and dealing with everything that goes wrong at the end of the day. It was purely ego. And so that took some work, but it's hard. And it's hard still now when like some decisions get made. I was like, I wouldn't have made a decision that way. Like I would have chosen something else, but I'm like, well, but then I get to do the fun brand and marketing stuff. So I just need to let it go. And there's more than one way to do something. Even though I obviously think my way would have been the best way, I just need to be okay with that.
I really appreciate your transparency there and the identification of ego around it as well, and the willingness to do the work as well. When we got your information, you mentioned being resilient, and it's a core part of building something meaningful. Yeah. Can you give us an example of what resilience actually looks like in your day-to-day life right now when things aren't working?
Ooh, I think it's just, I don't want to say it's not giving up because sometimes you need to know when to let go, which is something I've been working on. I think I'm very stubborn and when I want something, I have to get it. And oftentimes I see the outcome being a certain way. And so I've been working on sort of letting go of how things have to be or seeing things in a very rigid way and more focused on how I feel rather than a specific outcome. But I mean, I've talked through my career and all the different things and companies that have like failed, and I still continued and didn't give up. I think that's resilience.
I love that.
Yeah.
As I'm thinking about what would be the best way to wrap this episode. And I think I want to ask you of like, if everything went away tomorrow, what would you do? What would you be doing?
Define what is going away. You didn't tell me.
You're if everything, not obviously not everything, but if you exit tomorrow and you have you're out with your $1 billion, since you clearly set your price tag since the beginning of the show. If there's a $1 billion buyer, we'll give you Scarlett's number at the end of the show so you can text her.
I have to manifest it.
Yeah, 100%. So you get your $1 billion tomorrow. You're no longer tied to your brand. What do you do? How do you reinvent yourself?
Well, I go back to how I said founders are crazy. So we always want to start new companies. We almost started, the people don't even know that we started a company before we started recording within the 5 minutes of speaking to each other. So obviously the answer is I'm going to start more companies.
Colorado Bum coming to a store near you in 2 months.
You can't help yourself. I can't help myself. I like when I go see it with my founder friends, like sometimes they're like, oh, we're burnt out. We should go on vacation. And then like every day it's like, we should start this. We should start that. I was like, okay, guys, 12 companies just came out over the weekend. We need to calm down. Like we still have our current companies to run. We need to stop this. That's probably going to be what's going to happen. And I think spend more time, I think, mentoring and helping female founders. I think that's one of the most rewarding things that has been in my career. It means a lot to me when, representation matters. And when I go speak on panels or, I'm on podcasts and people reach out to me afterwards and they're like, your story was really inspiring. I never thought of becoming a founder. I've never, thought I could. And listening to your story, I decided to take the first step of doing that. And I've even had people who've worked for me, who've gone out and started their, own companies. And they're like, we saw you do it. And, we saw how you were, and that, you can build it in a way that, keeps your integrity and you could still be good to people and still have a business that's profitable. It shows people a different way of building a business. And I want to continue to do that.
That's so good. And we'll be right there alongside you when we exit for $1 billion. Since you said we needed to manifest, I'm manifesting our exit too at some point in time.
Yeah. Which company though? It might be multiple. It might be Colorado Bum and our current businesses.
Yeah, exactly. So now we're talking a Poppy style exit for like $3 to $4 billion.
Yeah, so many billions.
So many billions with a B. Scarlett, this has been incredibly fun and also very inspiring. I'm sure many people will appreciate hearing your story, hearing how type B you are clearly from all of your experiences, and your incredible talent to pivot and just venture into the unknown and crushing it while you're doing it. So thanks for sharing all of this.
Thank you. This is really fun.
100%. And to all of us listening out there, stay badass like Scarlett. And we'll see you next week for another episode of Badass Women in Business. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did recording it. If you like our show, please rate us, drop us a review on your favorite streaming app, and we'll catch you on the next episode. This was the Badass Women in Business podcast by Christy and Aggie.